Hi, I'm honored to be with you. I wish you a joyful and healthy new year with your friends and family. Nowrouz Mubarak. My hope is that this year will truly be a new day for the people of Iran, where they will be granted freedom, good health, peace, and prosperity. That can only happen if the Iranian people are freed from the oppressive and dangerous regime led by the mullahs. Let this be the year that freedom rings in Iran. And we know that there is an alternative to the tyranny of the mullahs. Madam Rajavi and the NCRI have a 10-point plan which envisions a peaceful, democratic future for the people of Iran, one where basic human rights are respected and Iran is a peaceful, non-nuclear state. The plan offered by the NCRI is one that would provide the Iranian people with peace and prosperity. Unfortunately, the current Iranian regime continues to isolate the Iranian people. Iran is viewed as a pariah in the region. Many Muslim and Arab countries have formed alliances against the regime. Many have raised their voices against Iran, including the Shiite populations in Iraq and Lebanon, who want Iran to stop interfering in their domestic politics. And the mullahs are deeply unpopular at home. We have seen the Iranian people take to the streets time and time again over the last several years. Iran has failed its own people. It has failed to take care of the people when they have struggled with the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, Iran is probably the worst country hit in the Middle East. But its own leaders failed to invest in its medical systems. They have covered up deaths in Iran. And Iran's supreme leader has actually banned Iran from receiving US and British vaccines that could save Iranian lives. But yet we have seen the Iranian people continue to rise up for freedom and for themselves. They have called for change. They have called for the downfall of Khamenei. A month ago, Iranians protested in the Sistan and Balochistan province because they can't afford to feed themselves. Instead of feeding their people, the leaders of Iran asked the Revolutionary Guard to murder the protesters. They opened fire on unarmed protesters, murdering over 40 civilians and injuring over 100 people. We stand with the brave Iranians who have taken to the streets for their own freedom and so they can feed their families. Not only does Iran brutally abuse its own people, but Iran continues to threaten the rest of the world as the largest state sponsor of terrorism, plotting assassinations, fueling proxy wars in the Middle East, and protecting the murderous Assad regime in Syria that has used chemical weapons against innocent civilians. Iran provides sanctuary to our enemies, including Al-Qaeda, and continues to hold Americans hostage. And Iran continues to expand its nuclear weapons program. The International Atomic Energy Agency recently announced that Iran had increased its enrichment of uranium at its underground plant in Natanz. The reality is that Iran should not be permitted to enrich any uranium. The mullahs have proven that they are not trustworthy. My hope is that the Biden administration will work with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle and with our international partners to insist that Iran not be permitted to enrich any uranium. Allowing Iran to enrich uranium was one of the flaws in the JCPOA, and it must be fixed. Although I disagreed with the JCPOA at the time it was signed, it is clear that Iran has no intention of renegotiating with the Biden administration in good faith. In fact, the Biden administration has already offered to re-enter the US into the deal if Iran will comply with its terms. Iran has refused. The Iranian regime never intended to comply with the JCPOA and hoped to take the cash they got in the deal, delay and deceive nuclear inspectors, and eventually get to the deal's expiration date so they could continue to ramp up their nuclear program, which threatens the world. In fact, the Iranian regime won't even come to the negotiating table now unless sanctions are lifted. They have already rebuffed President Biden's outreach and shown that they do not intend to act in good faith. We should not lift sanctions on Iran. We should continue the maximum pressure campaign against the murderous Iranian regime. We also need to lead an effort to continue international sanctions on Iran when it comes to its ballistic missile program. If we do not lead the effort on their ballistic missile program, Iran will continue to develop precise mid-range ballistic missiles that could hit Europe or its other countries in the region. And they will continue to develop an ICBM that could reach the United States of America. If there is going to be renegotiation with Iran, it must be for a stronger and more inclusive agreement. It must eliminate the flaws of the JCPOA. It should stop all of Iran's enrichment capability. It should stop Iran's ballistic missile program. It should stop Iran's activities that destabilize the region. Iran should no longer engage in terrorism. And most of all, Iran should be required to respect the human rights of its own people and of other people around the world. Let me just end by saying that with this Nowrouz, now is the time for the United States to have a bipartisan policy of continuing a maximum pressure campaign against the Iranian regime. We can do that through sanctions, through outreach to our allies, by working together across the aisle on behalf of the people who seek freedom in Iran and our own country. The Biden administration has an opportunity to renew bipartisan work in the Congress to stop Iran's malign behavior. We must work together to stop the danger posed by the Iranian regime to the world and to give the Iranian people the new day that they deserve, governance that is based on freedom and respect for human rights. The Iranian people this New Year's deserve a great new day in Iran, one based on freedom and one that has freedom from the mullahs and their oppressive regime. Take care.